Today, we define extreme survival as scaling a frozen peak or trekking across a barren desert. We equip ourselves with high-tech gear and call it a feat of human endurance. But for the vast majority of our ancestors, surviving a standard Tuesday morning required a level of biological grit that would break a modern athlete. Drop a modern person into the Middle Ages, and the fantasy of feasting in a castle shatters immediately. Statistically, you are a peasant. You live in a single-room dirt floor shack. Your house is your kitchen, your living room, your storage space, and your emergency barn. In this cross-section of a typical peasant dwelling, the dangers become obvious. Without a chimney, the fire's smoke accumulates with no escape route. Below that toxic cloud, you sleep on parasite-infested straw, sharing the exact same room with livestock to conserve body heat. The air you breathe is toxic. Your bed is a parasite colony. Your roommates are livestock. Before a medieval peasant even stood up to start their workday, simply resting inside their own home was a relentless respiratory and biological gauntlet. Breakfast offers no relief. The standard morning meal revolves around pottage, a stew that simmers for days, sometimes weeks, with whatever roots and grains you can scrounge up. You eat it with bread baked from cheap flour, mixed with sawdust or powdered grass. You have to soak the bread in the stew just to prevent it from cracking your teeth. But the real threat hides in the grain itself. Medieval rye was highly susceptible to an insidious fungus known as ergot. Because peasants couldn't afford to throw away bad crops, they baked the infected rye directly into their daily bread. Ingesting ergot acts as a massive shock to the human nervous system. Victims suffered severe hallucinations, violent muscle spasms, and severe vasoconstriction. As blood flow stopped, tissue died. This historical illustration shows the horrifying reality of gangrene, painful red lesions that spread across the limbs, frequently resulting in loss of fingers, toes, or death. To wash down this perilous meal, you need a drink, but hydrating with water is a terrible idea. Local rivers and wells double as the town's waste disposal system, heavily contaminated with animal runoff and raw sewage. Drinking a cup of untreated medieval water is a highly effective way to contract a lethal parasite. So everyone, even young children, drinks beer, specifically small beer, a very weak, low-alcohol brew. They didn't understand the chemistry of why it was safe, but the brewing process required boiling the liquid and fermenting it. That process killed off the deadly bacteria hiding in the water supply. Their morning routine reveals a brutal truth. A safe breakfast meant carefully navigating agricultural toxins and relying on low-grade alcohol, strictly because the alternatives would kill you by noon. By midday, biology calls, but privacy and plumbing do not exist. Your bathroom is a wooden bucket kept in the corner of the room, shared by your entire family. When that bucket gets full, waste management consists of opening your wooden shutters and hurling the contents straight out the window onto the public street below. Every household in the town repeats this exact action. The result is a bubbling brown sludge, composed of human waste, animal dung, and rotting food. It sits directly in the streets, baking in the hot sun and breeding clouds of flies. This topographic map shows how medieval town planning magnified the disaster. Gravity pulls everything downward. Rainwater washes the accumulated street sludge downhill, channeling it directly into the local river. In most settlements, this runoff entered the water supply upstream from the very wells people used for cooking and bathing. This created a perfect, inescapable biological loop. Contaminated water spread dysentery, typhoid, and cholera outward through the population. Sickness was so prevalent that millions of people hosted intestinal parasites their entire lives without ever realizing it was abnormal. Without the infrastructure to manage sanitation, medieval cities operated as accidental, highly efficient engines for spreading mass death. Living in a toxic environment guarantees you will eventually get sick, but you cannot afford a real doctor. Those are strictly reserved for kings and bishops. Instead, you visit the village barber surgeon, a man who cuts hair, pulls out teeth, and performs amputations without washing his hands. His methods aren't random. They are guided by humorism, the reigning scientific consensus of the era, which operated on a completely flawed understanding of human biology. This infographic illustrates how medieval medicine viewed the body. They believed human health was dictated by 4 magical fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. When a patient fell ill, the logic dictated that one of these fluids was out of balance. To restore that balance, the barber surgeon drained you. He would tie off your arm, slice a vein open with a rusty blade, and let your blood spill into a bowl. If he didn't want to cut you, he applied jars of leeches to your skin. You entered the room dehydrated and sick, and left missing half your blood volume, drastically lowering your chances of survival. When pseudoscience failed to cure a fever, or when crops died and cows stopped producing milk, terrified communities looked for a reason. Without the vocabulary for bacteria or weather patterns, society relied on a deadly backup plan. They blamed their neighbors. An accusation of witchcraft was a trap with no exit. If the town dragged you to the square, the primary test was the trial by ordeal. They bound your hands and threw you into the river. The logic dictated that the pure water would reject evil, so if you floated, you were guilty and immediately executed. If you sank, you were innocent, but you drowned at the bottom of the river. When illness struck or panic set in, humanity's best, most logical attempts to cure the body or protect the village almost always guaranteed a violent death. By nightfall, the exhausting loop closes. If you manage to survive the poisoned food, the contaminated water, the barber surgeon's rusty knife, and the paranoia of your neighbors, your reward is lying back down on a pile of infested straw to do it all again tomorrow. It is easy to look back at these conditions and view medieval people as foolish, but they were doing the absolute best they could to organize society and survive without the crucial missing data of germ theory. Surviving this brutal, toxic gauntlet required a staggering level of biological endurance. They fought through continuous infections, malnutrition, and environmental hazards for decades, persisting just long enough to pass their genetics to the next generation. Every modern comfort we enjoy today, clean water, warm beds, modern medicine, exists solely because they endured the unimaginable. You are here because, against all odds, your ancestors were the ultimate survivalists.